specifically, how do you meet that challenge as an entrepreneur? What makes me have a voice different to anyone else is that I am actually an entrepreneur, and I run and own two different businesses, one being Isha, my consulting business, the other being Frangelicas. And I'm going to talk more about Frangelicas today because the COVID impact on the hospitality, restaurant, and food industry has been unspeakable. And being able to adapt and change for that is something that gives me a little bit of credibility, because not only do I have the talk, but I've got the scars on my back to prove that I've done the walk. And so I hope that that adds a level of credibility beyond just good book knowledge. So I'm assuming that people who are checking in with this webinar are interested in both entrepreneurship as well as the issue of how to cope and adapt with it. So I thought we'd kick off. If you could each do a personal check in your mind, I'm going to reel off the 10 most common identifying qualities that make up an entrepreneur. And I'm going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. And the way that we'll go is I'll talk a little bit about COVID-19 and specifically why it's a great natural experiment. I'm going to talk about change. I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship. I'm going to talk about Frangelicas, and then I'm going to give a few words on being a leader of an organization, an owner-run organization. So that's kind of going to be the plan we'll go through. So let's just jump off. Firstly, these 10 qualities, or I suppose capacities, have, Jung once said that any strength dialed up too high becomes a weakness. So those of you living with some of these strengths, or the people around you, or the people that you direct, will know that there's also a shadow side. You need to tick all 10 boxes to be classified as an entrepreneur. There are entrepreneurial traits which we might all have. So let's get going. The first one is entrepreneurs are incredibly disciplined. They will make something work. It's not just an idea generation, but it is the capacity for personal discipline. So give yourself a score out of 5. 5 being yes, 0 being 0. The second quality is they have innate confidence. This kind of confidence is not bluster. It's really an innate capacity where they don't need to test whether they're extroverts, and I'm an extrovert, or introverts. They don't need to test with the outside world whether or not their ideas are going to work. They have an innate idea that that is their job and that they'll be successful with it. So their confidence is that they don't ask questions about whether or not they can succeed before they start. They're incredibly open-minded. So these things sound different, but open-minded in that they realize and look at every situation as a potential opportunity, focusing it towards their goals. So it's not just open-minded in a general way, it's open-minded with that determination to link things, which leads to another quality, creativity. So creativity being their ability to connect disparate ideas and connect them to their underlying motivated idea. They're also self-starters, meaning that they kind of have an ideology that if something's going to be done, they need to do it. And again, as I'm saying these things, you can all smile, and those people who know me well and who know some of you well might go, that's not always a strength. But these are some of the qualities. Determination. So determination is different to discipline. Determination is that the ability to succeed no matter what. And determination as a quality means that they don't believe something can't be done. So a barrier or a problem is something to be dissolved rather than solved, and to keep going. A very strong determination to succeed at what they're intending to achieve. They generally have strong people skills, verbal or not so verbal, but the capacity to connect, to communicate. Now, a lot of people at the moment are turning into entrepreneurs. Like, I don't know if you're a member of Facebook, for instance, or any other, you'll see lots of businesses doing lots of different things and selling things where they wouldn't sell before. That's not the same thing as strong people skills. So selling is not an entrepreneurial quality. It's a strong quality that often turns up in entrepreneurs. But many people with strong selling skills do better working in a business for somebody. So in and of itself, it can be quite confusing that. They have a very strong work ethic. So when they are doing something, their work ethic, they can work enormous hours. They're often first to arrive, last to leave, well past their ideation stage. And their mind is constantly on work. So those of us who are entrepreneurs who get into business with our families or our friends, again, as Jung said, when dialed up to high, it's always, and it consumes every relationship they have. They have tremendous passion. And one of those things is they don't really see what they do as work. They see it as a purpose. And even if they don't love the exact thing they've chosen to work on, their passion to succeed and to be excellent is what drives them. So they kind of always, passion gets them to the top of the mountain, and then they look further for the next step. So having said all of that, why are entrepreneurs being challenged in the current environment? So entrepreneurs would be people with those qualities, not necessarily owners of businesses, but often entrepreneurs are owners of businesses, not necessarily people who've adapted to make a buck, which would be more of a survival strategy, and the ability to see opportunities and maybe great sales skills. Again, not in and of themselves a perfect definition of being an entrepreneur. But let's kind of I'm just going to do a share now. I've made some PowerPoint slides. Now, the way my slides work is they are triggers. They are not going to be a whole lot of words. So as we go through it, it's going to really leave you with ideas, rather than a whole lot of content. So the first thing is COVID-19 a state of disaster, as in the picture on the right-hand side of my screen, or is it in fact an opportunity, as in the picture where lights go on? So at a personal level, speaking as an entrepreneur in Frangelica's, I can say that it was a bit of both. It's never one or the other. But what COVID has done as a social scientist, as Tracy said, I'm qualified as a social scientist, being a behavioral, organizational, and counseling psychologist. Why have social scientists been really enamored with the whole disaster of COVID-19? Because it forms a worldwide social experiment. It's basically a natural experiment where we can say the field is leveled across the world, and we can compare different individual responses to similar shock, if you like. So what has come out of it in terms of that research and what relates to entrepreneurship is that the speed of response and the nature of your response is really important in order to survive. So I'm going to talk about my personal experience at Frangelica's towards the end, and rather kind of go through some core principles, because not everybody might be that interested in how I applied them. But the kind of core idea here is it's not only what you do, it's how you do it that's going to help make it an opportunity or a state of disaster for you. So I would like to do a kind of response, and this is my picture of change, because working across the world and across different levels with individuals, with teams, I find that the general human response to change is the only change we want is the kind of change that rattles in our pocket, and even that we don't want. We'd prefer notes. So change in itself is very, very tough for human beings, no matter whether you call yourself an entrepreneur or not. Why is it difficult? Because the human learning process is really uncomfortable. So I wanted to illustrate that by asking you all to fold your arms just quickly with me. So if you fold your arms, and if you could do it, because this is something you have to learn by doing, not learn by watching, fold your arms, then notice which one you've got on top, and just reverse that. Put the other one on top, or we'll fold that one underneath, so you have the other one on top. Kind of, I don't know about you, but for me, it's not very comfortable. I could get used to it. I would have to work at it, but it kind of is a second or two, and then it starts to feel like it's wrong. So in order for me to get used to something new, there's a whole science behind it called neuroplasticity. I'm not going to get into it, but change is not always easy. And that's why it has, in fact, felt like a state of disaster for many. And also for businesses. Businesses have different phases in their life cycle. And if you're in the phase of thriving, which many businesses, including mine, thank God, was just before COVID, this feels like a real curved ball. There are a whole lot of businesses that weren't in that state, and therefore they've been able to respond in slightly different ways. And the leaders of those businesses have been able to respond in slightly different ways. So what does it take to actually, so is COVID a disaster, or is it something that is to be expected, or we should learn to live with it, if you like? Not so much the pandemic, but the fact that the world is moving at a stage now and at a rate that those of us are constantly lecturing. And I know so many people on this are teachers of one sort or another, and saying the only constant is change. What COVID has done is it has really brought, as I said, a natural reality of that across the world, and we've been able to see how people can cope. The biggest emotional impact of COVID to businesses, to families, to children, to grown-ups, to men, to women, to anybody, is that there is a sense of loss of control. And so how do you cope with that? That's something that different people are struggling with. And in order to talk a little bit about, as we move through the next topic, which is change, I wanted again to ask you to do a little experiment. I put up a symbol on the screen. I would like you, using a single unbroken line, to turn that into a 6. Just giving you a second or two, because unfortunately we don't have a lot of time. So if you've done that, great. So look at that symbol and think, can you convert it into a 6? I'm wondering if you've got any answers. Let's check it out. So there are 2 answers. What's different about those things in terms of understanding change and understanding how our minds work is that when I first put the symbol up, many of you might have recognized it as a 9, a Roman numeral 9. If you've learned the alphabet, and if you know that that's a Roman numeral 9, the fact that you've got previous learning and the fact that you know what that is actually a self-limiting belief, because then you tend to look for solutions within that paradigm, and you get into something called paradigm paralysis. When I do this experiment with children, for instance, or people who have never learned about the Roman numerals, it's a very quick exercise for them, because they just see something and they are flexible. They don't have an established mindset that they're working within. So putting an S, finding a physical word, or putting a 6 and finding a number. 1 times 6 is 6. And many times, some of you might be smiling and saying, but oh, you're cheating, Elana. You didn't tell us the line could curve. You didn't say it could be a number. True, but I didn't say it couldn't. So that is about mental agility. And to have mental agility is something that is much, much sought, but it's quite hard, because we live in a world where we do get into learning. We establish what's real, what's not. One of the biggest conversations we have in my family and is about whether a fact is a fact, but we won't get distracted by that. So the human response and the human ability to adapt is something that is quite challenging. And this whole sort of survival of the fittest really comes down to the survival of the quickest to adapt. And in order to adapt, you need some of those qualities of being an entrepreneur that we spoke about earlier. So I, in my own way, have grouped different phases of entrepreneurship, just because we have quite, I wanted to make sure that we would get through everything. So I've grouped them into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different phases. So the first phase I call generate. Every entrepreneur has a phase of generation. Now, the issue about generation is that this is not a linear process that happens sequentially. It is, in fact, a tautological process, meaning it's a circle, and you can be sent back to the beginning of the circle at many times during the lifetime of your business. So what's generation? Often it's about vision, it's about finding opportunity, it's about standing on your mountain and seeing a view different to everybody else. And that would be what COVID has done for many, many organizations, to say, hey, I can suddenly see a vista now that I couldn't see before. And like that box opening up with light, I can see an opportunity in that. And then all of those qualities that we spoke about, the discipline, the confidence, the self-starter, the open-minded, the competitiveness, the creativity, need to kick in. So the next phase of generally being an entrepreneur, so there's a phase of generation. There's a phase of monetization. Not every good idea gets monetized. And the process of taking an idea and monetizing it can be just like all three of those visuals. A picture tells 1,000 stories. So it's a working process, like the workhorse. It also means you've got to put one foot in front of the other, and it means you've got to pull quite hard. And often you need to pull people with you, and you need to pull your ideas down a road in a world that, although they are afraid of new ideas, it's a bit tragic because old ideas are even more scary. But so monetization involves hard work, putting one step in front of the other, also tenacity, staying at it when other people would give up. That's that whole thing about self-starter, and confidence, not necessarily expecting the world to approve of an idea, and lots of times where you just want to scream and pull your hair out. And if you recognize yourself in any of this, then you're going through your phases of monetizing your idea. The next phase is, as I said, these phases are not linear, they're tautological, and they go round in circles, and you can go in and out of them, meaning you can go from competing right back to ideation. You can be competing and suddenly you have to get into monetization, and that's the guy right up at the top. Because anybody who's in a business knows that cash flow is a big problem, and sometimes that can sink a business. Not the ideas, not its viability, but the cash flow. You have lots of different choices to make all the time when you're competing, and you have to work really hard. And you can never rest on your laurels. And this is something that's quite tricky, because change is something that we prefer to have control over. And it's like you have a great idea, you build it, and then the guy next door starts doing it as well. And now it comes down to price or speed, and the pressure is on to differentiate yourself. So the whole process of competing is an ongoing process of work. It's not a once-off. That's the point I'm trying to make around all of these different phases that you might move through. Entrepreneurs also move through a phase of thriving. While they're thriving, there's a lot of reflection that needs to go on. So you reflect on, I've called it the balcony, rather than being on the dance floor. In other words, many entrepreneurs, and I'm going to speak a little bit about it when I cover my own experience, can get lost where they actually become employees. In other words, they love the ideas in their business, they're wedded to them, their business is working, and they almost become quite locked into, this is the way we do things. And once you're on the dance floor and up to your eyes in crocodiles, it's very hard to actually keep looking at your business objectively and understanding it and learning what makes it work and being able to leverage that. So the thrive phase of a business is a little bit of a shoot yourself in the foot pace, because the world gives entrepreneurs lots of signals that they're winning, and it's very easy to get lost in that and actually lose your entrepreneurial edge. In other words, notice what the world is saying to you rather than only where the opportunities are and what the patterns underneath this good news is. The second picture is about constantly understanding what you're good at and seeing your strength. That's also really important, because once you're thriving, the business gets really busy. You can again get lost in the day-to-day, and you can end up drowning, where you're working in your business and not on your business, to coin a phrase that I didn't invent, but I think it works well. And the last one is that even while you're thriving, you're always working a tightrope, because very often you don't have the deep pockets or the next best idea, and the world can sometimes feel very unpredictable unless you get up on the balcony and start looking at the patterns underneath things. So each of these phases have psychological as well as personal as well as business ramifications. Another phase that entrepreneurs need to wrestle with, and this would be the fifth one, is the adapt or die phase. Now, I've put up two different pictures there. I'm not sure what they call out to you, but what they call out to me is the goldfish with the shark's fin. So often entrepreneurs are really good at morphing into what they need to be in different situations. And they aren't any one thing. They can be different things at different times. And they're used to adapting, but they can very quickly end up like the picture on the right, where somebody overtakes them because they're pushing things that they've become used to, which are now not very easy to push forward on. So those are the kind of phases that an entrepreneur would work through. And just before I get into talking a little bit about my experience with some of these, I wanted to share what my research and my profession has uncovered about adult learning. And that is that learning is a cycle of moving from unconscious incompetence through conscious incompetence, through conscious competence to unconscious competence. So if I can just illustrate with a very, very mundane example, driving a car. Unconscious incompetence is when you're little, you use a car, you go everywhere in a car, you never think about whether or not you can drive or what it's going to take. You are just totally unaware of what you know, what you don't know about it, and quite honestly, it's not in your radar. Then you get to be 17 and you want to get your learners, and suddenly you become consciously incompetent. You sit behind a car for the first time and you figure out what you know and what you don't know. Now, that's a very painful process. So any adult, and this could happen even say at a very micro level, like you get a new oven or you get a new cell phone or you get a new car, even something you really want, those first few weeks of figuring out how to make yourself in this machine or yourself in this idea work together can be very, very frustrating. So you have to master a whole lot of skills and then you become consciously competent. But conscious competence is very hard to last. So if we go back to the driving a car, you write your exam, you kind of remember your 3-point check, you remember how to use your mirrors, etc., and you do it for a very short time. And very quickly it becomes an unconscious competence. You know how to drive, you can't remember all the different things that you're doing to make the driving work, but you know how to drive. Now that happens in a business. You don't always think about all the different things that you've done to get to the point you are. And the problem with that is you can't necessarily dial it up when you need it, when you're in a situation. You may not know what has made you successful and be able to apply that learning. So that's kind of some of the struggles that we have. So moving now into Frangelicas. So many of you know that I own Frangelicas and all felt that would be a good idea to talk about it. So the brand of Frangelicas, that sign says a lot. We are still here. What happened, and just talking this presentation through with my kids, my one son said, because it was like going from hero to zero, and he said to me, "Mommy, it's not true that we went from hero to zero. It's true that we started 10 years ago and we were at zero, because although we bought a business that was a brand, it wasn't a business. It was really a hobby. It had lots of goodwill and some great recipes, but it wasn't a business. So one could say that was zero. We then built it up along with the community and much, much blessing. And we then kind of got to a status where it worked, and then things changed and it went to zero again. And COVID was a real change for us. Obviously, all the things that were working, if you go back to that side of monetization and competing and thriving, we felt that we really were there and we were going to keep working on getting better and re-innovating and making sure that we could adapt and offer something new, but we felt we had control over those things. We were working within the lines that we had created. And of course, when the government here and all over the world said that restaurants can no longer happen, an entire industry was decimated. And the ideas of takeaways, if you're a restaurant, and this is why many of in the industry have not opened, being a restaurant is not the same as being a takeaway business. It's a totally different competence, totally different business model, totally different cost framework. And so if you're geared up with the rents to be a restaurant and the staff, remember we had 4, and we still do, God willing, we will return to it, 4 go-to-market propositions or channels. The first one was our restaurant, where you came in and you sat down, and attached to that, as a kind of bells and whistles was a takeaway option. That was part of our restaurant offering, but it was not the core offering around our restaurant. The second go-to-market that we had was the kind of Be a Domestic Goddess. That was our home catering, or our office catering for secretaries or MDs who would order in platters and kind of looked like they knew exactly what they were doing, or ladies who ordered our food, or gents or kids or whatever, and plated it on their own plates, took it as part of our catering menu, plated it, served it, and looked like they were a domestic goddess. So that was our second go-to-market offering. Our third go-to-market offering was what our shop currently is now, and that is a food emporium or a ready-to-go offering. We did and always have had a retail piece of our business where we packaged our products onto shelves, priced it individually, and it can be a grab and go. Different from ordering off a menu, which would what you would do in the catering system. This would be portion size that is set, either individual or smaller portions, and you would just come home after work or on your way to work, grab something out of the fridge or grab something off the shelves. And our patisserie side was very much run like that, where people would come in and grab muffins and slices of cheesecake, etc. So that was our third channel, go to market. And that channel and the capacity we had in that channel was we could very quickly enlarge it. We could make our core business that one channel, which is what we were needed to do and what we decided to do. And we actually opened that channel the very first day that lockdown ended, the hard lockdown ended, the 19th of April. And we decimated our restaurant and translated our retail offering into becoming a supermarket, a handmade, fresh food. Not hot food, but fresh food. You could always get frozen food, and those people who are not kosher could buy from places like Woolies, but all of that food is made in big factories and contains preservatives and a whole lot of nasties and chemicals in the products. Frangelica's food was not like that, and people were looking for something that was handmade. Food is a very artisanal need. So we turned it into an emporium, and we basically took the one channel of our business, which actually was the smallest, and made it the single focus of our business. That actually, if we go back to my very first picture around the light bulb, coincided with a business strategy we had, which was to grow that channel. But it was kind of like God, the universe, life just said to us, actually, you will do it with no other bells and whistles attached. So we had that capacity. We're really grateful for that. But of course, the struggle still will be, because COVID, the pandemic, will not only change in the short term, it will change buying behavior, it will change people's relationship with food, it will change people. I think people will love much more going out now and socializing, because we've all got to understand what connection really feels like, and we love it.
Elana,
last channel. Oh, sorry, Trace. Is it hard?
We're just over 30 minutes, and I know that you asked me to pop in a reminder.
Okay, so we're at the halfway mark, and now just to the last channel of our business, which was functions, which also is still fun. So we had 4 channels, and 3 of them were really reduced to 0 by force, leaving us with 1 channel. And of course, in terms of our turnover ratios and our costing structures and our staff and our skills, we had to recalibrate many of the things in our business. At an emotional level, it wasn't an easy journey. I mean, I saw my husband is on as well, and he could probably narrate the story through his lens. But through my lens, being an entrepreneur was really, really hard, because it really felt like a world that had become sluggish and kind of felt like we were losing control. To get everybody back to a place of, there are opportunities here, what's changing, how can we do something better than anyone else, how can we actually leverage a strength we've got and very quickly monetize that. So going through those things was a lot of work, and emotionally really tested. I mean, I hadn't put together my final list of what the qualities were. And when I did, I really could resonate with how those things felt. the discipline, the confidence, the open-mindedness, being a self-starter, the focus on being competitive, the creativity, the determination, the ability to connect with people and take people with you, and passion, which is like an ongoing reservoir of energy that you really need to draw on. So I can handle individual questions if people have it, but I don't want to make this a Frangelica's test case, because I think there are many people on the end of my screen here who have similar experiences and probably even are better experts at it. But I can say that I was forced to really confront and engage with all the things that I knew from intellectual level and make it real and turn it into something that could work and take people with me. And that was quite a difficult but rewarding process. So I suppose the last thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I was asked to speak about this on another webinar, and that is, how does leadership work during this period? Because being entrepreneurial is great, but if you've got an existing business, which we did, and you need to engage with staff and you need to share what's going on, and you don't have a clear view of the future, how do you lead? So some of the principles that we followed and things that I really, really believe in is, one of the core ways that I try and turn up in the world is with integrity, meaning my definition, what I think, what I say, what I feel, and what I do must be in a straight line. So at that time, when we were told that we couldn't operate, we closed the shop on the 26th, and we actually closed the entire business down, every single channel. And we had to face the reality that we did not know what the future would bring. Specifically, we couldn't reassure our people as to what would happen. And what we chose to do was be honest. So we called all our section heads together. We shared with them the truth. This was the business. This was what was happening. And we really didn't know how the future would work out. And we asked them, how should we go forward? And they said, in whatever way we go forward, if there's any chance of success, we believe everybody in the staff is willing to share. In other words, if we have to drop everybody's salaries, everybody will co-sponsor each other. And that was quite an amazing decision. So we did put everybody out. At the moment, we have about 15 people out of 50 working. We are paying those people because they're working. We're also paying everybody else in some form or another. Some were able to leverage the UIF, and for those that are not, we are in fact subsidizing them and paying them so that there's nobody in our family who's starving. Because I also believe that if you want to keep a culture of commitment, people trust what you do when the chips are down more than when the chips are up. So we've done that. I believe courage, honesty, integrity, communication, telling the truth, not trying to be a hero, taking a rest from being a hero, making people part of the problem as well as part of the solution. All too often, business leaders think that they have to have all the solutions. And we really didn't have solutions, and we took it to our staff, and many of them are not educated, but we found that everybody committed, because there is a unity in understanding and being valued to be part of the problem solving, as well as being the recipient of good problem solving. So I know that we want to take some questions and allow some chat. Trace, I don't know where we're at. My watch says that I might need to move to that place. Am I right?
So I've been monitoring the chat box, Elana. No questions have come through yet. So perhaps we can open the mute so people can chat for you now.
May I ask a question?
Sure, I'm just not sure. I can't see everybody, so just say who it is, please.
It's Mike Sade.
Oh, how's it, Mike? Of
Okay.
course you can ask a question.
So just a little bit of background to everyone. Elana and I chatted extensively over the time of lockdown, as she had to make some very tough decisions, which were not just financial, but also kind of emotional and personal. So perhaps you can share with everyone how you were able to make those decisions and how you did it with your family. To me, that was the most impressive part, was listening to you and your family debate points, that nothing was done in what it didn't appear to be a dictatorial manner at all. And I'm sure that everyone here would get great insight into hearing how you went about that.
Thanks, Mike. And you were very much part of those chats. We used Mike as a kind of referee. So he remembers that they weren't so much sane discussions as sometimes full-on impassioned arguments. So the truth is, Frangelica's is a family business and a family-owned business. Me, my husband, and my eldest son, Daniel. And we are all quite strong personalities, and we all pull in slightly different directions. The other members of my family have got real strength on the operational side, but they had some deep concerns about some of the risks. And of course, me being more of an entrepreneur, I can be very frustrating. And if Simon did have access to a microphone, I'm sure he'd tell you that sometimes you need to understand that you can't do something. I found that a struggle. So what we did was we debated it. We gave everybody a voice. We looked at it in all different directions. And then we asked questions like, well, what would we lose if we tried this? And can we kind of suck it and see? So we live in a world where agility means that you can't have all the answers at the beginning. You sometimes have to kick the can a bit down the road. So we often made decisions in principle, asking what can we control? So for instance, how are we going to control the risk of being reported because we're doing something that is not allowed? Because as Mike knows, in the restaurant industry, there was a lot of gray areas. So there were some hard lines, which were very difficult to understand. And then there was a lot of gray around those hard lines. What does hot food mean? What can you sell? What's a deli? What's a takeaway? Because you weren't allowed to do takeaways. What is allowed and what isn't? And so we kind of explored all of those things. And our key process, if you like, was allowing us to engage with the difficult things as well. To say, okay, what would happen if somebody reported us? And how would we deal with that? Do we all understand what we're doing? And that is fresh food rather than hot food. And how do we separate the fact that our production facility and our shop are next door to each other? Because our kitchen became a production hub, and that ended at about 9 o'clock, and our shop opened at 9 o'clock, and we would take delivery from our kitchen as if we were a customer placing an order. So I guess, Mike, the pain of that process was robust and it wasn't fun, but it also means that when you're an entrepreneur, you tend to have partners rather than a very strict hierarchy, which can be quite frustrating because sometimes you want the hierarchy. I can certainly claim that, but you get much better quality of thinking when you allow there to be high levels of conflict, high levels of difference. And how do we make decisions? In the end, we did defer to one particular person getting to say the final say after we had explored what the risks were and after we had really said, are we all willing to make it work? Because it wouldn't have been cool if one person said, well, you do it and I'll watch and see. So the other part of being a family is that we all put our hearts together once we'd made decisions.
Elana, I have a question.
I have a question, please.
Okay, sorry, I have a question, Elana, about if you were in the event space right now, you know, what would you do? How would you do things, taking into consideration that it's still in lockdown?
If you were in the what? I missed the first part, I'm sorry.
In the event space.
In the event space. Event space. Is that right, Tracy? In the event space. Okay. So look, I think, interestingly enough, I think that lockdown is just a variable. It shouldn't be a boundary that you put around everything. It needs to be factored in as a part of your thinking, not the lines through which you bound your thinking, if you understand what I'm saying. So if you're in an event idea, I think you need to factor in all the impacts of lockdown and all the impacts of a pandemic as well as lockdown, because there are two dimensions here. The one is the legal framework and the sort of fiduciary framework, and the other is the health framework. You need to take those on board as real scenarios, because whenever you come up with an idea, there are things that are going to make it difficult for that idea to work. So I think the mindset you need is to see it as part of your brainstorming, and then to figure out, as I said to you, ways not to solve problems, but to dissolve problems. And without being specific, that's the kind of coaching I would do, because Tracy, as you know, that I do offer a service where I can partner with people to do many of these things. So I can't really unpack the specifics, but in principle, that would be my input. I hope that's useful.
Hi, name's Philip. Elana, nice presentation. Thank you very much. My question is this: what, if any, role did your business take in R&D during this lockdown, and what is the future going forward for Frangelica's and any business in the food industry with R&D going forward?
Okay, so research and development, definitely we do. I mean, that it's a little bit like, you know, if I could tell a story and take, I mean, a bit of driving a bus through your question, but I also am seeking to normalize the issues around COVID. Not to say that the pandemic is normal, but the business issues are actually part of what any startup business or any new ideas would face. And that, so for instance, competition. Everybody knows that Frangelica's was faced with direct competition, both emotional, physical, and financial competition, in a very aggressive way. About, I can't even remember the time, but a couple of years ago. And so R&D, people would say to me and to Simon, and would break our heart. They would say, yeah, well, competition is great because it keeps you fit, and it keeps you, you know, it's good for the consumer. So our answer to that, and it's pretty much the answer to what you're asking now about R&D, is that if you are the kind of business owner, and if you're running the kind of business where your focus on developing, researching, innovating, adding value is driven from the outside in other words, as a response to some sort of crisis, be it a competitor, be it a new legislation, be it a pandemic, then you are going to constantly be playing catch up. You're going to be like those guys in my picture pushing the square when somebody rolls the ball around. At all times and at any time, there are people on the fringes of your industry, of allied industries, thinking and going up to the top of the mountain and seeing opportunity. So if your ethos is to do what you do better than anyone else, even when there's no competition, which is part of the Frangelica's ethos, very, very deeply. So we constantly are researching and developing. We understand our community base. We think like our customers. We ask, what would somebody who can't buy things like, where's best practice? Could we do that? Could we do it better than even people who are not kosher? So we're constantly innovating. So that would be my answer. And we're constantly researching, we're constantly trying not to think about ourselves, but to think about what makes it sexy for customers to be fans of Frangelica's, and how can we keep that happening. So that would be my answer to the first half. I'm sorry, I think I might have lost something in your question. What part did I miss, Philip?
Not a lot. Just
okay.
The future of R&D going into after. Let's assume that we get over COVID.
We will. My children live in Israel, and a week ago, all restaurants, etc., opened. And those of us in the industry, Mike can speak to this because he is very much a mentor and at the center of much that's going on with the Restaurant Association. There's no doubt that the industry will come back, because the industry is part of society. People need to eat out. It's part of socialization in many parts of the world, including here. You get sick of cooking. You get sick of buying food. People like to have food cooked for them. So it will come back. How do you think about it? As I said to the first question, it's not about putting COVID as the boundary and then responding to COVID on your innovations. So it's not R&D to figure out that you're going to use screens, or you're going to put your seats, whatever, a meter apart, or you're only going to allow these many people in your restaurant, or you're going to put lines on the floor in your kitchen and you're going to wear masks. Or that is not innovation. That is reaction. That is about a stimulus that you have to react to. And often the procedures you need to take are not innovative. They are legislated, and you can very much follow the herd, but they're not differentials. So they're kind of like entry-level tickets. It's a little bit like that joke, you know, where the guy falls on his face every day and asks Hashem, please make me a millionaire, please make me win the lotto, please can I succeed? And this goes on for a day, for a month, for a week, for a year, and eventually a booming voice from above comes out and says, well, will you at least buy a ticket? So, sorry, Donna, R&D is research and development. The issue here is you've got to buy a ticket into the game, which would be your response to COVID, but that's not R&D, certainly not in my mind. If you want to research and develop your business, your customer base, how you can go further, it's less about coping with the constraints on your business and more about understanding your customers.
Thank you very much.
Great, thanks for the question. Any others? How are we doing for time? I'm not sure.
We're almost up, but there's nothing that's come through in the chat box. Are there any other questions for Elana?
So hi there, I'm chatting to you, Tracy. Is it possible I can get Elana's email address so that I can email the question? Or will you do that separately?
With pleasure. So I will send out communication after the session together with the recording and details for Elana. So you contact her directly.
Magic, thank you.
I also will just put it up now, if I can do that. I have got, oops, sorry. I have got a slide that the writing in the sand says thank you, and there are my details. My website is going to be up. It is still under construction, but it should be up by the middle of next week, so you can keep using it. Otherwise, there is my email and my cell phone, both of which I would be very happy for people to correspond with me. Thanks, Trace.
Elana, can I ask you one further question, please? How does one change their mindset for success if you are not in a good place?
So, I mean, that's a big question, Tracy, but maybe what I can do is to answer at kind of like some tips level rather than making it this is the solution. So as a psychologist, I know that when you can't see a future, when you don't see a future, that's the definition of depression. So if you don't understand how you're going to be part of the world tomorrow or the next day, or how your business is going to be part of the world in the next day, that's going to lead to some form of depression or some form of internal harm at an emotional level or a psychological level, or even, God forbid, a physical level. So my first tip would be to sit down, to go, if you are an entrepreneur, and I'm speaking now only in the context of entrepreneurs because that was the scope of this particular discussion, but obviously it could be answered in different ways in another scope. But if you are an entrepreneur, firstly, you may not be an entrepreneur. You just may be an owner of a business, which means that you've had a good idea and you've made it work through hard work. And now the world has created a situation where you don't know if you're going to be a future. You're drowning in overheads and expenses. You are not really equipped to have all the frameworks and all the assumptions that you built your business on being upended and overturned. My first suggestion would be try and imagine what success would look like for you. So stop worrying about the problems and start imagining that you could succeed. Don't figure out how, just say, what would it look like? Could I even imagine a place where I can be thriving again, where I can be successful, where all the things that matter to me will be intact? And if you could kind of put your energy into articulating that, both in a picture, a verbal picture, in other words, writing it up, and a mental picture. And then once you've got that, what I often say to people is, if you were to hold an elastic band tightly between your two hands, and let's say that the hand on your right was your desired future, and the hand on your left was your current reality. And let's assume, like with COVID, your current reality has meant that you've stepped way back, and now you have to, the elastic band becomes really tight. Your desired future stays the same, but your current reality is stepped back. Now, holding that tension is untenable. It hurts. Physically, it would hurt with an elastic band, and also practically it hurts. Now, what are your choices? You have two choices because you've got two poles. The one is that you can, I mean, how do you fix this? What I would say to people is, what do you feel you've got control over? Most people would say the current reality, and I would say not really. A lot of that has happened to you, and a lot of it has happened around you, and a lot of it has happened from things you can't control. So if you can't control that, what most people do is they say, okay, I've got to release the tension, and they start moving their desired future towards their current reality to make it easier to survive and to feel okay. I would suggest what you do need to focus on is how can you switch, hold your future where you want, and what work do you need to do to move your reality closer to your desired future. So that's kind of at a conceptual level that I would really suggest that. And at a personal level, I think exactly the same things would apply, is rather than focus on the feedback that the world or the system is giving you, go inside and kind of take stock. What do I really feel my strengths are? And what am I really good at? Remember those three pictures with the kitten that looks in the mirror and sees a lion? I think that if we could all try and focus on that, that would really help. And the other picture was of getting up on the balcony, that when you're on a dance floor, if you imagine you're at a party, the music dictates everything. The people around you dictate everything. It's only when you run up to the balcony and look down, you see a different picture. So sometimes you need to step back out of your reality, look at the eyes through which you're looking at things, put on a different set of glasses, and ask the same questions. I don't know if that's useful. Trace?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Elana. So the comments are coming through about how much everyone has enjoyed this webinar, how valuable they have found it, and we're so grateful really for your time this morning. One thing that I didn't mention at the onset of this was that Elana, Simon, Daniel, and Frangelica's as a whole has been an absolutely incredible support system to AuthJet. We had such a wonderful Women's Day last year at Frangelica's, and Elana is always the first one to assist us with anything we need. And for that, we're always extremely grateful, Elana. So thank you so much. And on behalf of myself and the team this morning, Helene, Laurie, Lorato, we thank you for giving up your time and sharing such valuable insights with us. I have posted details in the chat box of the two-part webinar that you will be doing for AuthJet on the 1st and 8th of July. And I will further send out your details when we send out the recording after this morning's webinar. So on behalf of me and the team.
Sorry, Trace, just before you sign out, the last point you made, and thank you for honoring us, but the truth is that, you know, we all stand on the shoulders of the people who come before us, and if AuthJet weren't doing great things for the community, we wouldn't be able to offer support. So a big shout out to all the hundreds of ways that you and Helene and the whole team there, who I don't know personally, so I can't name, are doing what they do. And also, if I could just make a comment, because we are and have been, and I think people should know that at the time of the lockdown, the outpouring of love for us from the community was absolutely unbelievable, to the extent that people actually wrote and said, please don't worry, we would never ever allow you to go out of business, we're going to do whatever it takes. So I mean, for us that was a huge, you know, huge feedback, and we are so very grateful. Just on that, and I know we're out of time, one of the things about Frangelica's, and people say that the food tastes special and is taste special, is that we have a spiritual dimension to it, and that is that the people who cook our food, we insist that they are happy and are real people, like not happy as in, you know, just smile, but we try and take care of each other. We make space for humanity. We believe that you should taste, you as a person need to taste of your productive work. So if you're making something, and like anybody who's doing anything and it's great, you should also yourself be taste of good things. So we do work hard at that. And I really think Simon needs a big shout out on this, because he's really the heart of Frangelicas.
Oh, yes, yes.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Although I didn't get all the programs, but I got the tail end of it. It was good. Okay.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Tracy, I interrupted your sign out.
No. I couldn't hear properly. The audio was really bad there for one moment. But Elana, thank you again for everything. And it's been an absolute honor to have you spend time with the Orchard businesses and mentors this morning. And again, on behalf of Jeff, thank you for all that you do for us. Again, if anyone would like to make a donation to us, the information will be in the follow-up communication. You can use Elana as a reference, Elana webinar as a reference, and we wish you an incredible day. And as you said, Elana, we're all in this together, and we're here to all do our best to help each other in every way.